Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, host COS today, along with my co-host, Mr. Ken Kashuba. Ken, how you doing?
Doing fine, bud. How are you?
Good, good. Turn your volume up just a tad.
A little better?
That's better. That's better.
Yeah.
Ken, we haven't been tracking this on a routine basis, but I thought uh, we're closing in on that 300 mark. This is number 295. And you've been on board for 154 of those.
Wow.
Man, you've been around a long time, haven't you?
I'm
Wow.
really starting to. You're starting to really make me get gray here.
Grayer.
Gray.
Well, at least you got something to turn gray.
I started on the gray side, so you just made me grayer. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see. Okay. All right. Well, listen, we got a busy schedule for everyone tonight, and I hope everyone enjoys it. The first thing that I want to get into is our contributor out of Missouri, Brett Sturley, the COS State Director of Missouri, has been doing some segments for us on tariffs and trying to understand tariffs. And he has put together an update on, I call it the Liberation Day update on Trump's tariffs. And once again, I don't know. I'm still confused, but I continue getting at higher levels on this. Is all I can say. So anyway, let's get right into it. I met up with Brett this past week, and we sat down and recorded another segment on this. So let's get right into that. Okay.
Yep.
Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, COS Today host. You know, in just a few weeks back, we had one of our contributors, Brett Sturley, COS State Director for the state of Missouri, do some segments for us on tariffs. And I believe we generated 3 segments with Brett, and he did just a great job on explaining what tariffs are all about, the definition, and really they were educational and very, very informative. So I asked Brett if let's wait a few weeks or so, and will you come back and kind of give us an update on how the tariffs are going? And I'm sure, as all of you know, if you've been watching the news at all, the reactions have been mixed, I guess. But anyway, I think overall we're going in the right direction. But anyway, I've asked Brett to come back on and give us an update, and we just may have him come back periodically and give us an update on these. I haven't mentioned that to him as yet, but I'm sure he'll be open to it. So let's bring Brett on and let's get into a tariff update. Okay, so let's bring Brett on. Hi, Brett.
Hi, Dale. How are you?
Good, good. As you heard, I set you up to come back at future times and give us an update. Is that okay?
I heard I got volunteered, or I guess voluntold. So yes, that's not a problem.
You did get volunteered. Well, Brett, as I mentioned in the introduction there, obviously the tariffs have certainly been in the news. A lot of pros and cons. I'm sure you've heard what's been going on. But so what kind of the best you can kind of give us an update as to what's happened since I guess the official kickoff date was Liberation Day, I guess is what was the actual kickoff date. So what's been happening since Liberation Day, Brett?
Liberation Day was April 2nd, and there's definitely it's definitely a moving target. So this is as up to date as what we have as of right now. But this is definitely a moving target. But I wanted to maybe start off just really quickly and just remind everybody what a tariff is. And a tariff is a tax that one country imposes on the goods or services imported from another country. And a country might impose tariffs to either raise revenues, solve a trade imbalance, protect native industries, or use as leverage over another country. And we covered some statistics in the first in the first three episodes. I guess the first episode, I believe. The U.S. trade balance with the world is approximately $1 trillion a year. So that means that we import $1 trillion of goods or services more than what we export. And so there are different theories. Some people will say that that's a bad thing. Some people will say that that's a good thing. I'm more of a free trader, but in going through this exercise and analyzing this, I kind of like to have, a free trader would say there's no tariffs anywhere. Well, that is great in theory. As I've studied this a little bit more, that's great in theory if every single country had the same goals, the same values, and the same tactics. Which obviously we know that's not the case. If you look at between the United States and China, China has an endless supply of slave labor. They really don't care if whatever their country's goals are, if it results in the deaths of hundreds of thousands or even millions of their own people, they really don't care. The United States is on the right side of this, to where we do care about our people, and we don't allow that to happen. So it's really the free trade is great in theory. In practice, it doesn't translate as well to practice. But I still think, as free a trade as what we can have is what we should strive for. But so President Trump, when he announced his tariff regime, he originally said he was going to impose reciprocal tariffs, which to me that kind of made sense. That would mean, like, if China would apply a 20% tariff to a certain American product, the United States would impose a 20% tariff to that same Chinese product that was imported to the United States. That's in effect evening the trade the trade picture there.
Uh-huh.
That's not what happened. The Trump formulas seem to add up, and I was trying to figure out exactly how he came up with these numbers, and his administration came up with these numbers. It seemed to take into account the tariff that a country imposes on the United States, our trade imbalance with that country, and an amount representing some currency manipulation between the two countries. And we have an example, because it's always good to have an example of going through these numbers here. So let's take a look at a specific example. And so, for instance, if you look at this, that whole sum that I just said was subtracted by 100%. So in this example, let's say it was determined that the tariff that a country, well, this is kind of I'm sorry, this first slide kind of depicts that. So this total is then taken and subtracted from 100%. So if we look at a specific example there on the next slide, let's say, for instance, that a country was imposed a 20% tariff on one of our products. And then you have to figure in this trade imbalance factor. So let's say that total exports of the United States to country A is $100, but we import $110 from that country back into the United States. So that trade imbalance is $10 or 10%. And then let's say that there's a currency manipulation factor. And all that means is that currency, without getting in the weeds too much, currencies trade in relation to each other. So say that the US dollar is the reserve currency. Right now, with a Canadian dollar is worth approximately 65 cents, 68 cents of, to a dollar. So you would take, to convert the currencies, you'd have to take a dollar, and then you multiply it by 1.35, and then that would get you to the Canadian dollar. So $100 in US would be the equivalent in Canadian dollars would be $135. So you can manipulate the way that currencies relate to each other, which is well beyond where we're going to talk here. So we have this tariff of 20%, a trade imbalance of 10%, a currency manipulation factor of 10%. So the tariff that would actually be imposed on that country under President Trump's calculation is you take the 100% minus 20%, minus 10%, minus 10% for the actual 20% of the actual tariff imposed by that country, a trade imbalance factor of 10%, and a currency manipulation factor of 10%. You subtract that from 100%, you come up with 60%. So that is the quote unquote reciprocal tariff, which in pretty much every instance is going to be generally much higher than what that country actually imposes on the United States. There was also, in the case of China, there was an additional punitive tariff that was applied that, bringing that latest number, from the last thing that I had heard as of today, was 145% tariff on all Chinese products exported into the United States. So this isn't exactly a reciprocal tariff, but this is a formula that was used in order to arrive at that tariff amount. And we've done that. The Trump administration has used that for every country from Canada, Mexico, to China, to Europe, in determining that tariff amount. Now, this has brought several countries to the table. There are some. It's been reported somewhere around like 50 or 55 countries that are in negotiations with the Trump administration to have some type of trade deal to eliminate or lower these tariffs. There are about 15 to 18, is the last that I heard as of this morning, countries that have some type of a memorandum of understanding of just a real good, a pretty solid framework on how these tariffs are going to roll back. There hasn't actually been a specific trade deal, quote unquote, struck yet, but it sounds like that those are coming pretty quickly. And I believe that the intent of this trade regime was basically to reset global trade. And if you read The Art of the Deal, the Art of the Deal principles are that you have a position that you want to arrive at, and you always open your opening position, your opening offer is way beyond where you want to end up. But sometimes it seems so ridiculous that it's almost unbelievable. But what that does is it completely resets the whole entire conversation on your terms instead of the other party's terms. It breaks that whole entire paradigm. So then you bargain back to what your position is that you actually want to arrive at.
Okay, Brett, I got a question here now.
Yes.
So I guess I'm not quite understanding this formula.
Okay.
Is the intent here to get back to a zero tariff imposed by country A? Is that the objective? Because this is what you would call a punitive tariff, wouldn't it?
It is, and this really demonstrates that whole the whole art of the deal mentality, that you just go with something that is just, like I said, almost seems absurd on its face. And like, why in the world would we want to impose a 60% tariff on an ally like Canada, Mexico, or Europe? Well, again, the whole theory is that you negotiate back to a fallback position of where you want to be. Now, one thing that President Trump did say in his first term when he was talking about tariffs and imposed tariffs, and the Biden administration continued tariffs, say like on China. Somehow that was okay, but it's bad whenever President Trump proposes it. So go figure. It's probably a little bit of media bias there. But I remember him saying in an interview, and I would love to be able to find. I've searched for it, and I cannot find the interview, but I know I didn't dream this. But he said that his intent was to use tariffs to get to a free trade basis.
Right.
And President Trump has been called, erratic and unpredictable, and you never know where he's coming from. I really find him very predictable. He says and does whatever he thinks that's going to put the United States of America in the best bargaining position or get the America the best quote unquote deal. And I think that's what he's doing here.
Okay, I'm going to take this step. We done with this?
We're done with numbers here. So,
okay.
But yeah, so obviously, the stock market, the markets have had a lot of heartburn here, and they react emotionally. And they always say, you buy the, let's see, is it buy the hype and sell the news? No, you sell the news and you buy the hype. So, whenever the market reacts emotionally, they don't like uncertainty. The stock market doesn't like uncertainty.
I've always keyed on the word uncertainty. Whenever there's a great deal of uncertainty, the market really fluctuates.
100%. That causes turbulence. And whenever we saw the markets drop, where they're dropping 3, 4, 5% a day, 1,000-point drops and 1,500-point drops. And I think now the market's closed back up here today. I think if we look at where we ended April to where we began April, the markets are almost back to even. I mean, they're within a couple points. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think it's very negligible, which probably a reason why you don't hear this in the news anymore, because things have kind of leveled back out. But I wanted to. I was listening. I wanted to try to come up with, the messaging hasn't been very, very good at this. I think that, you have Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, has done just a fabulous job, I think. But then you have people like Peter Navarro, Howard Lutnick, to a lesser extent, that are on his President Trump's economic advisory staff. I mean, personally, I think they should never ever be on television again, especially Peter Navarro. I don't think that he's done President Trump any favors whatsoever, because his language is very hyperbolic, and talking about how we're going to raise $600 billion a year on tariffs. No, you're not. That's not a real number. But I wanted to try to drill down and try to figure out, okay, exactly what is the theory behind this. And I heard an interview with Stephen Mirren, which is President Trump's chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. And I thought it was really fascinating. I thought this really might bring it home. He's an advocate of using tariffs to rebalance global trade, which is President Trump's view, it appears. And he approaches this topic from a point of view called mercantilism. And I'll explain this. Mercantilism is basically, it's an economic theory where the government intervenes and regulates the domestic economy and trade policy in order to promote domestic industries. It's not protectionist per se, but it is to make the global marketplace a little bit more advantageous to domestic industries. It's an America First type agenda. And so Mirren, if you want to look his name up, it's spelled Steven, and it's Mirren is Miran. Yeah. And he posits under mercantilism that the entity which bears the brunt of tariffs is the party that's least flexible to make changes. And here's a good example that he has. Say you're relocating to a new town and you're in the market for a home, and you find a home in town A that you like. When you start crunching the numbers, you notice that the property taxes are extremely high in town A. And so maybe you might ask your realtor to look around, are there any other markets where I can find a similar home to fulfill our needs? And that realtor finds a home in a neighboring town. You like that home just as well, and the property taxes are much lower. You decide to buy that home. So in this example, you, the buyer, is flexible. You can choose to buy a home with lower taxes in a lower tax area than live in a higher tax area.
Mm-hmm.
The seller is inflexible. Their home is where it is. They can't pick their home up and move it to a lower tax area. So they're inflexible. So to make their home more competitive, they may have to lower the price in order to compensate for the higher property taxes to make it more attractive to buy. So Mirren adapts this analogy to the tariff discussion by saying an American consumer can substitute another product to avoid imported products from countries with higher tariffs. So the tariff country is less flexible because the U.S. is likely their largest trading partner and not easily replaceable. So consequently, the tariff country bears more of the pain of this tariff. This isn't a perfect analogy to the home buyer analogy because there are other markets to sell to, but there is some applicability here in how mercantilism applies to President Trump's tariff policy. So that's kind of where we are here right now. This is a moving target, but hopefully that gives the audience a little bit more of an insight in making sense of President Trump's tariff policy. And there are various carve-outs. There's been carve-outs. The auto carve-outs have the tariff rate is lowered and it's been postponed. Same thing with some microchips and electronics like iPhones. That's been moved around. And again, if you look at it, it looks like it's really herky-jerky and that President Trump doesn't really know what he's doing. There's lots. President Trump's a smart guy. I don't agree with everything he does, but he's a smart guy. He's got a lot of smart people behind him, around him. So if you take it from the point of view is that President Trump acts and says at any point in time in a way that he believes is going to put the United States in the best position to succeed, that's really the constant. So that in that aspect, it's very, very predictable looking through that lens.
All right. We got to wrap it up here, Brett. I think much more will develop over this 90-day pause period here. It's where so much of the negotiations are taking place. So I definitely want you to come back on again. Maybe in another 30 days and kind of see where we are. Maybe at the end of May, 1st of June.
Sure. Yeah. So
okay.
That'd be fine. It's definitely, like I said, it's definitely changing day by day and sometimes hour by hour. So yeah, it's interesting.
All right. Hey, thank you very much, Brett. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale.
Uh-huh. Well, folks, that'll wrap it up for this tariff update with Brett Sterling. So hope you found it interesting. I certainly did. It's hard to grasp. I understand, but I think as we get through this 90-day pause period, it will eventually start to make more sense. I do believe. So that's it for today on COS Today, and have a good evening. Good night, everyone.
Well, Dale, you're muted. So I'll start off by saying Brett was very informative. I find it very interesting. And, the way I look at this thing is, we haven't tried anything like this. And when you look at the imbalance that was there as the numbers were given to us, we've been unfairly, targeted over many decades, obviously. So I think, as confusing as it is, nobody else has tried anything like this. We've just gone on willy-nilly, accepting everything as it is. And to me, this is something that at least it's trying something different.
Well, and it's going to take time. So I think it's good that Brett has agreed to come back.
Yeah.
It could be an every 30-day segment of COS Today.
Yeah. And hopefully in one or two more comebacks, we'll really start to see some real advantages to
start to make sense and start to see some positive results. Let's hope so.
Yeah, if we see the results, then who cares how complicated it is? And if we don't...
Yeah, that's the truth. Well, Ken, let's move on. How about let's take a few minutes and you tell everybody about that QR code up in the corner of the screen there, what that's all about.
Sure, that's our support QR code. We look for people who are enjoying the segments we're putting out and the COS Today programming with all its contributors. That it's just a way of saying that you support us. You take your smartphone and snap a shot of that. I think everybody's familiar in how to use QR codes nowadays. And all it's going to do is bring you to a place where you can stick in your name and email address, and that'll give you access to our support platform. A platform where you'll find other supporters and lots of information and really some good contributor segments that have been done over the years now. That gives you a place to get the full collections of those. So it's a nice place to kind of review and pull up what you want to pull up. So that's our support QR code.
All right, good. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, about every broadcast, we do a little piece on that we call Dave's Daily Dose. And this is our contributor out of Minnesota, David Punt. And he has done one on Trump's third term. So I think it's very good. So let's take a listen to that, and we'll be right back. Okay?
Sounds good.
So what about that third Trump term? Will it happen? Does he want to? Does he know someone to get that done? Is it too early to think about a fourth and a fifth? Can I have one too? This is Dave's Daily Dose on Brooklyn Road Radio. I'm David Allen Punt. The serious lefties and serious members of the loony lefty mainstream Democrat media have talked about the third, fourth, and fifth terms since the trip down the escalator. Something he said to Obama late in the second term tightened the jaws of the sainted one, the light bringer, and suddenly in 2014, Trump went from a Democrat, much loved, much revered, much admired rich guy with a TV show to sincerely detested and hated by everyone except loyal followers. Interestingly enough, the number of loyal followers has now grown to be larger, to a larger crowd than those suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. But just because the loony crowd is in the minority doesn't mean they won't eagerly grasp at the tiniest utterance to whip up into a major typhoon status to make Trump look bad. When talk of the third term first came up in recent history this year, it was during a discussion with a gal who's trying to make a name for herself among the loony lefties. Kirsten Welker, Chucky Todd's replacement at NBC's Meet the Press. When Welker asked Trump over the weekend if he'd like to run for a third term, he answered, "I like working." All right, that's it, the smoking gun. The world of the left leaped from their seats with glee, danced around the room, and in a chorus of glee sang, "We've got him! We've got him!" Let's run that tape back a second. She said, "Do you want a third term?" And he said, "I like working." At what? Real estate? A golf pro? Go back to law school? I like to work too, and nobody's accusing me of wanting to be president. Although a small group of close personal friends were saddened when I didn't throw my hat in the ring for a Minnesota State Senate seat. What could go wrong, they moaned. You've only lost the last 4 elections. Well, okay, it's the only 4 you were ever in that you lost. But they insisted this might be your time. Sorry, I like working too much. When NBC's talking head Welker asked Trump to clarify, Donnie J said, "I'm not joking, and it's far too early to think about it." And again, the crowd of TDS suffering never-Trumpers, anti-Trumpers, hating Trumpers danced with glee, once again raising their arms and legs and screaming, "We've got him! We've got him!" Perhaps the Trump haters would consider one or two of the current problems we as a nation are wrestling with. Real problems that need real solutions. Venezuelan gang members and a trillion-dollar debt are just a couple. And there's that bubbling under explosive economy we're going to have to learn to deal with as well. Too much prosperity, man. Too much prosperity. I'm David Allen Putt.
Oh, Dave does a good job on those.
Very entertaining.
They are entertaining. Boy, he cranks them out right and left. I have a hard time staying on top of them and picking the one out that I want for our next live stream. So, yeah, he does a very good job. Well, we finally got around to another part on Meet the Founders with Larry Hudson, and he's still on George Washington. This is episode 3. Episode 3, part 3, segment 4. Or
Yeah,
have I got that right?
I just called it part 4, Dale.
Part 4. Okay. We'll just call it part 4. Okay.
Being that we hit 4 and we were still on 3 and 4, I was getting confused. So I just called it part 4.
I think we may wrap up George Washington in one more part. I believe we'll wrap it up, and then I think, unless he's changed his mind, I think he's going to move to Ben Franklin now, which there'll be a lot on that one too. But anyway, Larry just does a super job on these. So we got together again here last week and recorded this on Meet the Founders. So let's just jump right into that, Ken, and we'll be back shortly. Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, COS Today host. We're ready to embark on another segment with Larry Hudson on Meet the Founders, and we're still working on George Washington. So much information surrounding George Washington. So it's taking us a little bit longer, but anyway, Larry's just doing a great job. So I want to, without further delay, let's bring Larry on and get going on this next segment. Hi, Larry. How you doing?
I'm good, Dale. How about you?
Good. Well, Larry, we're still on George Washington, and for those that are tracking the numbers here, this is episode 3, part 3, segment 4. I think I've something like that. Okay.
Only
Anyway.
you can keep track of that, Dale.
All right. Okay. Well, Larry, I know we quit last time before you were ready. So let's pick it up from there. I see that if I recall right, Washington is now back in New Jersey after crossing the Delaware River for a third time.
Yeah,
and he was defeated. He's defeated the Hessians in New Jersey, and now he's learned that General Cornwallis is coming down from Princeton to retake Trenton. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. Pick it up from there, Larry.
Okay, we'll do it. You know, when General Howe, he's one of 2 brothers. You know, there's an admiral and a general, and they were sent here to bow us and bring us back into the fold. When he heard about the American victory at Trenton, he ordered Lord Cornwallis, who's now under his command and is now at Princeton. I think he had about 6,500 troops or so. He wanted him to retake Trenton, as you mentioned, and then after crossing the river, for the third time, the Delaware, Washington is now facing off to meet Cornwallis at a place called Assunpink Creek. That's a creek just a bit south and east of the city of Trenton. And when Cornwallis arrived in the late afternoon, he found the city empty. And he soon learned that Washington's positioned south of the city along this creek. But he also learns that there's a ford that's unguarded, and he wants to use that ford to flank Washington. So he needs to do that in the daylight. So he decides to wait until the next morning to continue his attack. And Washington has also learned that the road to Princeton is unguarded, and he's decided that he's not going to confront this larger force that Cornwallis has. Instead, he's going to leave his position under the cover of darkness, which is something he's done successfully, several times before. So during the dark of night, he marches his men north, skirting Cornwallis and his men as they slept. And the next morning, a British reinforcement group departs Princeton, as it would be, and they move south toward Trenton to reinforce Cornwallis. So as you might guess, Dale, Washington runs headlong into this group and fighting breaks out. And it's called the Battle of Princeton. At some point, the British commenced a bayonet charge. And as you might suspect, the line starts to break and they start to retreat. The Patriots are in trouble. And it's actually, the line soon did break just about the time Washington arrived on the scene. And it was said to have written directly into the fracas, calling for the retreating Americans to rally around him. And they did. And he quickly rode to the front, ordered them to reverse course and charge the British. And as you might guess, the British line now collapses and Washington pursues them, killing or wounding about 500 of them and taking some 300 of them prisoner.
Wow. Okay. Well, did I hear you say that Marines played a part in this battle?
Well, I think I had that in my outline. And yeah. They are involved here. The Marine Corps was founded in November of 1775. I know that, Dale, because I'm a Marine. I was in the Marine Corps for a number of years.
You were a pilot, weren't you?
I was a pilot in the Marine Corps. I was not one of these Marines, but we were founded in Tunn's Tavern in Philadelphia in 1775 on 10 November. Now, the Army was formed first, of course, back in June of that same year, and then the Navy followed in October. So it's Army, Navy, Marine Corps in that order. And then, of course, the Air Force comes along after World War II in 1947, I think it is. Okay. But the Marine Corps' primary duty back in that day was to serve as the Navy's infantry aboard ships while they were at sea. In fact, the term Marine is French. I think it means of the sea or something like that. And I first became aware of their involvement, the Marine Corps' involvement in fighting when Jefferson was president. He used the Marines against the Barbary pirates in Tripoli. Okay. You might remember our anthem says from the shores of Montezuma, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli.
Right.
But it turns out that it was actually here in this battle, the Battle of Princeton, that the Marines met the enemy on land for the very first time and not off of a ship. And they apparently were in the thick of it during Washington's decisive counterattack.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay. So here we have Washington, after failing repeatedly in New York, finally getting his feet on the ground and beating this British war machine in the field, right? I mean, does this turn out to be the turning point in the war?
Well, no, not exactly, Dale. After crossing the Delaware, I think it's back on Christmas Day, if I remember, 1776, about 6 months after we declared our independence, Washington embarked on what many historians have called the 10-day campaign, or a 10-day campaign that would change the course of the war, but not a turning point in the war. That's going to come later at the Battle of Saratoga, and Washington, of course, plays no part in that battle. But culminating here at the Battle of Princeton, Washington has really managed to win two successive battles, Trenton and now Princeton, which seemed to prove to many looking on that he and his army can actually defeat the British toe to toe. Remember, as we discussed before we came on tonight, he had come from the French and Indian War and somewhat of a hero, despite his actual record. He didn't really have any wins in the French and Indian War.
Right. I remember you saying that. Yeah.
But he was considered a brilliant tactician and best able to lead the Continental Army, so he was put in as commander-in-chief. The New York fiasco following Boston, the siege of Boston, however, had instilled much doubt in the Congress and the American people. And so he was slowly losing his forte as the guy to do the job. But these two successes at Trenton and Princeton brought him a renewed reputation, that of being cunning and determined and resilient, as well as a new esteem for the army that he was in command of. So what became about at this point was a nation that was ready to get behind him once again and hopefully drive the British out of America.
Okay. All right. So where are we headed next in our saga of Washington as commander-in-chief? Now where?
Well, after Princeton, Howe and his army left northern New Jersey by ship, and Washington was forced to guess where he was headed, as much as he did after the siege of Boston. And he soon learns that Howe has landed a force of over 15,000 men in Maryland, where he's now poised to attack Philadelphia, which, of course, is the capital of our newly formed country. Many residents have fled the city when they learn of the pending attack. And so to counter Howe, Washington positions his forces that are roughly 14,000, I believe, in strength. So pretty equal and very large at this point in the war. He's positioned them on the north side of Brandywine Creek, which is southwest of the city, in an attempt to thwart Howe's advance on the capital. But as in New York, he chooses to split his army in two, and the result is a repeat of the Battle of Long Island, with his flanks being reversed, and he suffers a defeat. Howe won a quick victory, but it wasn't without paying a huge price. By the close of the battle, the British suffered almost 600 killed or wounded, and the rebels counted only 200 dead, 500 to 600 wounded, and they captured 400 British. So Brandywine resulted in a British victory, but Washington's army really had survived the battle and demonstrated an ability to withstand what amounted to the full power at that point in time of the British Army. I would note that more troops fought at Brandywine than at any other battle in the American Revolution. And it was also the second longest single-day battle of the war, after the Battle of Monmouth, which we'll go to later, with fighting that lasted 11 long hours.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So Howe wins here. So did Howe then march on Philadelphia and take the city and the capital?
Yes, he did. He rode into Philadelphia, and he was welcomed, really, with joy by many loyalists or Tories who had stayed behind. And fortunately, the members of Congress, they fled for their lives to York, Pennsylvania. And this was yet really another very low point for Washington. He knew he had to hit back, and he had to get back and get on the momentum and get a victory. It was important for him to maintain the morale of the army. So he got his chance again, fortunately, to regain the initiative when he learned that Howe had divided his army for some strange reason, leaving the bulk there in Philadelphia while he encamped at Germantown, which was a small town just a few miles northwest of the capital. And he had only about 9,000 troops under his command at that point. Washington had been reinforced to approximately 11,000. And so, feeling he had a superior force, he decided to attack Howe using a night approach similar to what he used to attack Trenton and the Hessians. So early in the morning, he attacked and gained the momentum, but a dense fog, unfortunately, set in and blanketed the entire battlefield. And in the confusion, Howe rallies the troops, counterattacks, and recaptures his base camp, driving the Americans back to their original positions.
Well, this sounds like another defeat for Washington, not a victory, correct?
Well, yeah, yes, and no. Dale, it was hardly a win for Washington, in that his troops suffered over 600 killed or wounded, and approximately 400 were captured. Howe, on the other hand, had lost 100 less, it looks like, and none of his troops were captured. But interestingly enough, the battle wasn't considered a win for the British either. Once again, to many onlookers, both in this country and in Great Britain, Washington had shown great resilience, and his troops had proven themselves really to be capable, tough, and aggressive. And despite the appearance of a British victory, many Europeans, especially the French, were impressed by the continued determination of the Continental Army. And I've read many historians feel that the French were so impressed that it contributed to their decision to enter the war on America's behalf the following year.
Okay, so Washington continues to remain unscathed by his continual defeats at the hands of the British. By all accounts thus far, he is leading a charmed life. Where are we headed from here now?
Well, you remember Thomas Paine, the pamphleteer.
Yeah.
He was a soldier in Washington's army. He wrote, I don't know if he wrote this to Washington or he wrote it in a pamphlet or what, but he wrote, an army in a city can never be a conquering army. So Washington took that to heart, and he decided to keep Howe cooped up and contained right where he was in the city while winter approached. And coincidentally, another British army was operating in North America at the time under General John Burgoyne, and they were advancing towards Albany, New York, out of Canada. And the Battle of Saratoga was being fought simultaneously right now with the action here around Philadelphia. And as I mentioned earlier, the American victory there at Saratoga under a General Gates and a General Benedict Arnold proved to be the great turning point. You mentioned that earlier. This was the turning point in the war for the Americans, and Washington isn't involved there at all.
So Saratoga was considered the turning point in the war.
Yes, shortly after the victory at Saratoga, our Congress sent an emissary to Versailles to tell the French about the Americans defeating Burgoyne and the British. And then it was just a few days later, the French agreed to a formal alliance with America. Washington finally pulled his troops back out of Philadelphia and decided to spend the rest of the winter in a place called Valley Forge.
Valley Forge. Okay, well, I think everybody remembers reading about the terrible conditions at Valley Forge. Were the conditions as bleak as what we were led to believe?
Oh, quite so, I think, in many respects. The temperatures weren't as cold as we've been led to believe, but adequate food and clothing were just not available. Meat, in particular, was in short supply. Something called fire cake, a damp mass of flour, I guess, and some herbs that they could find, and bits of leather and other things were baked on a hot stove, and that was typically the daily fare for the farmers around Valley Forge. Unfortunately, opted to send their meat and their grain to Philadelphia because they would receive English pounds instead of supplying Washington, who needed this stuff desperately, where they would receive worthless paper script. So it was a matter of greed, actually, or real money. And it just so happens that whenever Washington found a farmer herding his cattle to town, his troops, he had the herd seized, and he put the farmers in the stockade. He had gone to Congress to get the authority to do that.
Really, really. Well, I remember reading back in history that the soldiers were often left bloody tracks in the snow during their stay at Valley Forge. Was it that bad? Is that true?
No, not exactly. I'm sure there were probably some bloody footprints, but there were snow squalls and ice storms and even an occasional blizzard. But in fact, I've read where it was fairly a mild winter for southeast Pennsylvania. The temperatures often dropped below freezing, and while it's true that nearly, I think, 2,000 soldiers perished at Valley Forge, cold wasn't the biggest killer. It was disease. Nearly 1 in 6 died from disease.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
The most common was influenza, typhus, typhoid fever, and dysentery. And most were the result of just plain poor hygiene,
Yeah,
or sanitation in the camp.
Well, here's another name that I think we've all read and heard about, Baron von Steuben. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And his efforts at turning the Washington's army into a professional group. Now, how important a role did von Steuben? Am I saying that right? Von Steuben?
I'm not sure. I say Baron. Well, actually, his name was Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben. That's how I've been told.
Von Steuben. Okay.
Steuben.
Well, how important a role did he play?
Well, a very important one, actually. He'd offered himself up to Washington as a volunteer.
Okay.
No rank, no pay. He didn't want to command troops. He just wanted to drill them. He didn't even speak English. He wrote in French, and he had to have his instructions translated into English. I'm told, or I've read, the Marquis de Lafayette was somewhat helpful in that regard. And he taught soldiers really basically how to efficiently load, fire, and then reload their weapons, and then how to move in columns instead of in single file marches.
Okay.
That was his big contribution. And interestingly, I think, in addition to his military expertise, he set camp standards, camp layout, proper sanitation, and conduct while they were encamped. And it was largely due to his efforts that they didn't lose more soldiers to the unsanitary conditions that they found themselves in.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we're running close on time here, so let's kind of wrap this up. How long were they at Valley Forge?
Well, they arrived in mid-December of 77. They departed the following year, I think, in June, so about 6 months.
Okay.
In February, France and the colonies signed an alliance pact, as I noted previously, and a bit later, Washington's spy network informed him that the British were about to abandon Philadelphia. So he immediately starts to pack up and give chase.
So where was he headed then?
Well, Howe's inability to meet and defeat Washington's rebel army has cost him his job. And George III has replaced him with a gent named Sir Henry Clinton.
Okay.
The British also feared the French naval forces were going to blockade Philadelphia, which led Clinton then to abandon it in favor of New York City, which was a loyalist stronghold that soon became the British headquarters for war operations. Washington, along with his troops, they marched out of Valley Forge after Clinton and his troops. As Clinton marched through New Jersey on his way to New York, they destroyed a lot of property, confiscated a lot of supplies and food, and they inspired a growing hatred of the locals among the area's civilians there. And the two armies will eventually clash in late June in New Jersey, which begins the Battle of Monmouth, where we're headed next. We're going to look at that battle and Benedict Arnold's betrayal in our next episode.
All right. Benedict Arnold. Yeah, that's a familiar name. Yeah.
Yeah, Benedict Arnold.
All right, Larry. That's a wrap for this segment. Thank you very much. Always very interesting. Always very
Oh, I enjoyed it. Hope it wasn't too tedious.
interesting. No problem. No problem. Larry, thank you very much.
You bet.
Well, folks, that'll be a wrap on this segment of Meet the Founders with Larry Hudson on George Washington. So we'll be back shortly for another segment, and we'll pick up with Benedict Arnold. So everyone, have a good day. Thank you very much. You know, Ken, this series that Larry has been doing, I've just been so amazed by the number of men and women, I guess there were women involved too, in the American Revolution from both sides, quite honestly. We're talking hundreds and thousands of people. And it's just, and you know what? Larry pointed out to me that now just focusing on the revolution itself, there was a whole Southern campaign going on during this revolution. We're only focused on really the northern part, you know, where it all started. But there was a whole Southern campaign, and I kind of like to encourage Larry to maybe do some more series, some more segments focusing on the Southern campaign. But anyway,
yeah, it's really hard to put yourself in that time period when we're, you know, where we are with such modern warfare technology and everything that we even when you look at, you know, the world wars and Korea and those, I mean, nothing like what those men went through, and just the differences in battle. It's, you know, it amazes me, and it's hard to put yourself into that time frame to really understand what they went through.
You heard him talk about the Tories. And now these were Americans that were loyal to the British.
Yeah.
And he's telling me that there were actual, I don't know if it was multiple battles or a battle, but there was at least one battle where we were fighting Americans. Americans were fighting Americans.
Yeah.
In this. I find that, wow. I find that really, really.
He does such a deep dive that,
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, obviously Washington is, you know, one of the most well-known for that time. So it'll be interesting to see what he comes up with after Washington. But yeah, to get into Benedict Arnold coming up and some of the other well-known instances, I find Larry's research on this just to be great education.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Every broadcast, we try to bring in the current week's update from our national organization and convention of states. So this is another one of those weekly updates. So I think they call this number 16.
Yeah, so, I think it's her last as an intern. So I think we'll be getting a new intern.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think this might be her final adieu. And I think there's a new intern coming in. I think her internship is up, and I've enjoyed.
Yeah, she's been doing a good job.
So yeah, it's some good stuff.
Okay, let's get on with it then here.
The Senate held a key hearing on Convention of States, President Trump tapped another COS endorser for his team, and a new U.S. congressman officially joined our list of supporters. Plus, stay tuned for a special announcement at the end of the show. All that and more on COS Now.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Welcome back to another episode of COS Now. I'm your host, Rachel Martin, and on this show, we break down all the latest news in the Convention of States movement. We've got a lot of news to cover, but before we do, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so that you're always notified when we have a new video. With that, let's get into today's topics. On Thursday, the Texas Senate State Affairs Committee held a hearing on SJR 54, a clean Article 5 resolution with no expiration date. Here's a rep from Texas Public Policy Foundation speaking in favor.
The framers gave us this tool as a means to responsibly curb the ambitions of federal excess. We should utilize it to press for a reconfiguration of the federal government in a manner that is consistent with liberty and limited government. By passing this resolution today, we can send a clear message to Washington that the time has come for reform. So let's take this step and through our actions, encourage other states to follow our lead.
President Trump announced that yet another Convention of States endorser will be serving in his administration. Constitutional attorney Mark Levin was named to the Homeland Security Advisory Council.
There's only one movement in America that's standing up to them, and it's Convention of States. There's not another one. We want our Constitution back, and we're going to take it back whether they like it or not.
COS president and co-founder Mark Meckler recently appeared on the Steve Gruber Show to give an update on the movement.
You have some allies inside this administration. Does that change the math?
Yeah, I think it does, and obviously we couldn't have planned this, but we have Vice President J.D. Vance as a supporter, the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins, Caroline Leavitt is a supporter, Mike Huckabee is a supporter. So we have administration support all across sort of the highest levels of the administration. I do think it changes things. And I think right now we are pursuing President Trump's support. We actually have a petition online at conventionofstates.com/Trump, which is an open letter to Donald Trump. If Trump weighs in, I think that absolutely flips the balance, and I think we see a Convention of States called pretty rapidly.
Last week, Convention of States announced another high-profile endorsement for the movement, and that would be U.S. Congressman Zach Nunn of Iowa. Nunn served in the U.S. Air Force as an airborne intelligence officer and is currently a colonel in the Air Force Reserve. Here he is speaking as an Iowa state legislator in favor of the COS resolution.
Will we leave all decisions at the federal level and forfeit our 10th Amendment rights? Will we fail to act when asked by our constituents? Or will we as the state of Iowa join in a league with others who throughout U.S. history have identified a Convention of State as an opportunity to provide a proving ground for new ideas, to hold federal government, whether Republican or Democrat, accountable when it no longer answers to the people, to rein in the trillions of dollars in deficit spending? If not for us, then who? If not now, then when?
Now it's time for a Q1 recap on all of our legislative wins. Here's all the victories from the COS resolution from the first 3 months of 2025. In Texas, the House Committee on State Affairs passed with a vote of 8-5. Meanwhile, in Montana, the House Business and Labor Committee passed with a vote of 11-9. In Idaho, the House Judiciary and Rules Committee passed with a vote of 8-7, while the Iowa House State Government Committee passed with a vote of 13-10. New Hampshire House State Federal and Vet Affairs passed with a vote of 10-7. In Kansas, the Senate and House Federal and State Affairs passed on a voice vote, and the Senate floor vote passed 29-11. In South Dakota, the Senate State Affairs Committee passed with a vote of 8-1, and the House State Affairs Committee passed with a vote of 8-5. The Senate floor vote passed 23-9. In Wyoming, the Senate Judiciary passed with a vote of 5-0, and the House Education Committee passed with a vote of 6-3. The Wyoming Senate floor vote passed 22-7. Indiana passed 34-ready and was the first state to do so. Before I let you guys go, I have one last announcement to make. So if you watch some of my older videos, you know that I'm an intern here at COS through the Emerging Leaders program. Over the past 9 months, we students have met on a weekly basis to discuss servant leadership, Western civilization, and the attributes of a good statesman. We've read passages from philosophers such as Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, and C.S. Lewis, just to name a few. But this internship is so much more than studying philosophy and finishing up projects for our supervisors. The friendships that have been made over the course of this program have been such a gift. I was telling my supervisor the other day, it's amazing how you can bring together complete strangers from across the country and yet have some of the deepest philosophical conversations you've ever had. We've pushed one another to stay curious, we've brought new perspectives to our discussions, but most importantly, we had fun. This internship and the work culture at Convention of States is unlike any other because we firmly believe that duty is ours and results are God's. My time here at COS and the people I've met along the way have greatly impacted my life, and I don't think I'll ever be able to forget that. While my friends and I are stepping into new adventures, COS is welcoming the next class of future leaders. I'm sure I can speak for all of us. If you're searching for an opportunity to grow in your faith and to learn how to serve your country, sign up for this internship. I'm not being dramatic when I say it will change your life. So my time here is coming to an end, but you guys are in luck. Taking over the show is one of our talented writers and producers, Jake Fay. If you are familiar with his blog posts or his work in the Story of Series, you know that he has a passion for the Convention of States movement and that he's working to build a brighter future for generations to come. That's all I have for today. It's been a huge blessing to have this experience at Convention of States Action, and I can't wait to see what comes out of this movement. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of COS Now. Bye, guys.
Well, see, if I'd have watched that to the end when I reviewed it, I would know that.
Well, and she said in the beginning she got a special announcement at the end of the show.
Well, but I didn't know what that was. All right, okay, you got me. All right, well, that was good. I know that Texas thing. Texas was already a past state, but they had this sunset clause in the and so they wanted to do away with the sunset clause. So I guess they had to basically reintroduce the resolution and get it passed again, I guess, to remove the sunset clause. Anyway.
Yeah, there's always a bit of risk in that, I guess, but yeah, leaving the sunset clause in there, leaves that hanging over your head. So,
but I thought that was very interesting. We've got a number of states where we've passed out of committee. So boy, I hope some of those states come through yet in 2025.
Yep. We're just, we're getting through the first quarter here. So, we're hoping maybe in the second and the third quarters here that we pop off some states and make some real movements. It would be really nice. Yeah.
Well, the next thing I want us to bring to our viewers is you've heard us say on our broadcast here that we approach these issues facing our country from the COS perspective. And I know I've said that many times before, and I thought I would just take some time and put together a little presentation on just what we mean, what is meant by the COS perspective and how that is formulated. So I put together this little video, and then I'm going to play. And I think what we will do, Ken, is play this like maybe once a month or something, from time to time, just to remind people of what we're trying to do here and the perspective that we're trying to bring to issues facing this country. So let's take a look at that, and we'll be right back, folks.
Sounds good.
Greetings, everyone. This is Dale Parrish, COS Today host. I've been wanting to take a little time to make it clear to our viewers how we on COS Today, how we approach national issues that we discuss on our live stream. So I call it the COS perspective. So I want to take a little time and tell you and explain to you what our COS perspective is. Now, let me bring up a little PowerPoint that I've got prepared for us. The COS perspective, okay? Now, there are two basic factors involved in forming our perspective. Number one is the resolution that we propose in Convention of States for holding a Convention of States. This is a resolution that we need to get 34 states to pass and sign on to in order to call for the convention. Right now, we're at 19 states. The second component of the COS perspective is what I call the COS Convention of States core values, and I'll get into those very soon. But here, let's just take the COS resolution at this point in time. And our resolution calls for the imposition of fiscal restraints. Now, we're talking about in a convention of states where we would propose amendments, not pass amendments, but propose amendments pertaining to these three areas of the resolution. And the first one is to impose fiscal restraints. Obviously, as we all know, the national debt is approaching 37 trillion, out of hand. So there need to be fiscal restraints imposed, and we want to propose amendments to the Constitution that would deal with fiscal restraints. The second part of we call these pillars of our resolution. So the second one is to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. Now, this covers a wide area. Basically, we're looking at reining in federal overreach and to then restore the power and ability and rights of the states. And the third part, the third pillar of our resolution deals with term limits. That's term limits for Congress as well as other federal officials. So that takes in a wide range of individuals and positions in our federal government. So that's the first leg, the first component of the COS perspective. The second component that I mentioned to you was our core values for Convention of States as an organization. And the first one, to preserve constitutional originalism. And this is basically to uphold the meaning and intent of the Constitution as it was formed. The second core value, foster responsible self-governance. Now, this is very, very important. This is where we encourage citizens to take responsibility for their communities and government. In other words, get involved. Okay? Cultivate servant leaders. Promote leaders who serve the people, not themselves. Be kind. Practice civility and respect in all interactions. Next, produce meaningful results. That means to focus on real, impactful changes rather than symbolic actions. And finally, to revere Judeo-Christian values. This is to acknowledge the foundational role that these values play in American heritage. So, as I said, the two components of the COS perspective would be the three pillars in our resolution and these six core values of our organization, Convention of States. So basically, to wrap it all up, the COS Today mission then is to address issues from the Convention of States constitutional perspective. So this is what we try to do in Convention of States in COS Today. Address issues from the Convention of States constitutional perspective and to promote, obviously, calling for a Convention of States utilizing Article 5 of our Constitution. But I hope this gives you a little better idea of what we're trying to accomplish here in Convention of States in COS Today, and to kind of give you a better idea of how we approach issues in our country and in our nation as they're going on, and how we want to apply our perspective. So that's what I wanted to do today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this is informative to you. Thank you very much.
Really good, Dale. That's a good reminder and a good overview. Yeah, we should probably play that once in a while just to remind everybody.
Yeah, I think we will. I think we'll do that once. It's good kind of remind everyone about where we're not everyone, not only viewers, but ourselves, where
Well,
we're
ourselves. It's easy to get caught up in. I think we both realize, and I think a lot of our viewers realize that the federal overreach has given us so much material, and there's so much overreach involved that we kind of get, tunnel vision on that. Yet the other segments are just as important. But yeah, there's just so much overreach going on that we could probably, like you said, we could probably do nothing but that segment.
Right. All right. Another piece that we want to present tonight is we did this on our last broadcast. One of our contributors, Diana Tellis, who happens to be your counterpart in Ohio. Diana's involved doing interviews and talking to people all over the place. And she, some time ago, she sat down and did this interview with a gentleman out of Ohio, Mark Paquita, I think I'm saying that right, who does a podcast called GFI Ohio, I believe it is. And he did a kind of a long interview with Diana about convention of states. So we've been breaking it up into segments. So I wanted to present another segment here this evening of his interview with Diana. So you will see him asking Diana the question, and then Diana will respond. So this starts with him actually asking the question. So let's do this. This is our next part of this interview with Diana Tellis.
What do you think are the most compelling arguments for why a convention of states is needed today, say, to address federal overreach or fiscal issues?
I mean, today, my favorite topic would be that a few things. DOGE, for one. I mean, that's certainly wasn't what was on everybody's mind 13 years ago when we launched this effort. But if we want the efforts of DOGE to be made permanent, then it needs to be codified. With the next presidential, administration, if they're not as committed to what is happening right now in the Trump administration with DOGE and this paring back of bureaucracy and wasteful spending, it will come right back. It will come right back. So there are amendments. We'll talk about that in a little while, but there are amendments that we can help keep that under control. And that's the number one thing. I think that's our message of the year, honestly, because the other thing is two things can be true. I don't like executive orders. I can acknowledge that they've done some good things in kind of controlling some of the things that were going on in this country, but they're not permanent. The next president,
right.
we have no guarantees who's going to be in the next seat, in the seat. And if they're not committed to the same things, to fiscal restraint and our national debt, I mean, I don't know exactly what does it look like when we fall off the fiscal cliff. I mean, our kids and grandkids, I have grandchildren, they're going to pay for this. They already are. That's reason enough for me right now.
Yeah. And I think your point, I think, is that too few Americans understand that, let's say you did an executive order to form something like DOGE. And even if the Congress passed it as a permanent agency in law, that law could easily be overturned the next term, for example, if people who didn't like DOGE got into power and could get a majority. If it's in the Constitution, to get it out of the Constitution, you have to go through the same onerous process that you've just discussed to get it out. So that's why, I'm assuming that's why folks supportive of the Convention of States want to have these issues in the Constitution, whether it be term limits, whether it be balanced budget, whether it be power allocation or things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and if Congress were going to fix that, I mean, they could write legislation. So I would argue that there's two parts of what we're trying to do with our resolution. It's to restore parts of the Constitution that have been sort of reinterpreted, and secondly, to add some new things. And if Congress has proven that they're not going to do it, and we can, by way of this convention, do what Congress won't do. So they've had every opportunity to find a way to balance the budget. They've allowed bureaucracy. They've given up their power to bureaucrats. They've given it up, and we want to take that back. Let me talk about the restoration of the Constitution, because it's a good time for that. So I brought with me today the annotated Constitution. This is everybody. Lots of people carry around that pocket Constitution. My kid has one. I know one of my legislators I've talked to many times has one. I have one. But this giant annotated Constitution, which is 2,000 pages, is an example of what has been done to the Constitution by way of Supreme Court decisions and interpretations. So it's not the same Constitution. It is definitely being touched and really amended kind of through the courts. But the restoration that I'd like to focus on today, and I really do want people to hear this, because there are three things, in my opinion, and I come by it by doing a lot of reading and a lot of listening. The Commerce Clause and General Welfare Clauses have been reinterpreted in that Constitution, and it has allowed spending by the federal government. It's a pathway for any kind of spending the federal government wants, regardless of what the original Constitution had intended. The original Constitution said anything that the states could do, the federal government couldn't. They had enumerated powers, and there weren't very many of them, really. And now they spend on anything they want. And that's how we got where we are. There's a couple other items, too, that got us where we are. I think income tax, 16th Amendment, and I'd like to see that capped at I don't know, 15% or something, but certainly put some sort of cap on it, because we could really change the way we spend, and the federal government wouldn't be able to hold the states hostage really for monies that really should have stayed in the state in the first place. And then the third item would be the annotated Constitution and the reinterpretation, the income tax, and the 17th Amendment. And those three things changed the way government was done. It just hugely. 17th Amendment changed the way the senators, U.S. Senate, was elected. Instead of the state legislatures putting their senator I want to say it was 1911 or so. I don't know, something, or a long time ago. An amendment, the 17th Amendment, passed, which allowed the citizens to elect senators. So once that happened, it untethered the states from the goings on in the country. In Washington, D.C. So that's how you get things like the healthcare law passed, where that was a really hard, heavy lift for the states. Some of them couldn't afford it. They pushed back against it, but their senators voted for it, because the senators were doing their own thing and working on their own accord. But in reality, the states should have been attached to those senators in a way where legislation that doesn't suit the state should never have been allowed. So those three things really changed the landscape of this country. In my research and in what I've been hearing, I blame those three things. Now I don't think we can't touch the 17th Amendment in this convention, maybe another convention under different topics, but there's no topic that really would allow that to be, withdrawn. But we can reinterpret the Commerce and General Welfare Clauses and reword them to match a little more closely to what the founders intended. We could do that in this convention that we want
because of the balanced budget aspect of it.
Because
fiscal restraint.
It's overreach bigly. For sure. It's both. It's actually both. It falls under both, because it has caused fiscal irresponsibility and it's overreach. They're spending on things that the federal government is not allowed to spend on. Absolutely fits under both.
Got
Excellent interview.
Yep, she does a good job. Just Ken, just for your information, let's go ahead and prepare a part 3 of her interview for next Monday, so that we'll keep this going. I'm not sure. I don't know how many parts we'll get out of that long interview, but let's just keep going. See what.
Well, I think not only we'll get whether there extra parts there, but from what I understand about the interview, he is going to be searching for people that will be putting up a rebuttal to her and letting her answer questions that way too. So I think there's a lot more coming from that side of things.
Okay.
I'm hoping there are some people out there that come back and kind of want to put up a little resistance to that, because I think it as we've said many times and as we've heard, the truth has a way of finding its way to the top. So,
all right, we'll see. I'll see. Okay, let's talk about what's coming up here on COS today. Our next broadcast, which will be May 12th, we're going to do a little bit on the illegal immigrant deportation status thing that is going on, and still putting together more things for that broadcast, but that'll be one of the highlights on May 12th. Then following week on May 19th, Brett Sturley is coming back again. No tariffs update this time, but he's going to talk about the Ukraine minerals deal. And mainly the emphasis is really on national security. And so this should be very interesting, I would think.
Yep.
Okay. And then on May 26th is our next roundtable, and John hasn't selected the topic as yet for that. So we'll hopefully on next week we'll be able to announce what the topic's going to be for the next roundtable.
I think he waits for the next brush fire to really rise to the top. So.
Yeah, he's watching the news every day. Yeah,
whatever's the hottest brush fire of the week. Yeah.
He generally has a pretty good eye on things, I will admit. Folks, as we always say, if you have any comment or question about tonight's broadcast or anything about COS today, feel free to drop us an email at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. All right, Ken, let's do another COS Basics with John Ackerman. And once that's completed, we'll come back and say goodnight to everyone and then wrap up with Maringo Mike. So let's go to COS Basics.
John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana. This is the ongoing COS Basics series on myth busting. And here's the myth that I'm going to bust today. Those who say an Article 5 convention is a constitutional convention. In other words, they say that it is intended to replace the entire Constitution. They say everything would be up for grabs, just like at the very first Constitutional Convention, 1787. We would lose our Bill of Rights. We could even get a whole new Constitution. That's the myth. Here's the fact. An Article 5 convention has to have a defined agenda. It's not a wide open, anything goes event. And here's the interesting thing. Both the left and the right agree on this. The left and the right don't agree on much these days, but one thing all legislators agree on is that a convention has to have a defined agenda. The phrase constitutional convention and the implication that everything is up for grabs was originally part of a disinformation campaign launched by liberals in the late 50s and early 60s. And here's why it's disinformation. First of all, the language of Article 5 is perfectly clear, okay? There's only one thing this convention can do. It can propose amendments. That's it, from start to finish. That's the only thing it can do. Propose amendments. Look at the text of Article 5. It restricts amendments to the Constitution, this Constitution. And I'm quoting here. In Article 5, it says, quote, amendments shall be valid as part of this Constitution, close quote. Now, I underscored the word this. It's not underscored in the Constitution, but I wanted to call it to your attention. Article 5 itself says, quote, amendments shall be valid as part of this Constitution, close quote. And listen to what Roger Sherman said on August 13th, 1789. Here again I'm quoting, all that is granted us by the fifth article is that whenever we shall think it necessary, we may propose amendments to the Constitution, not that we may propose to repeal the old and substitute a new one, close quote. So Article 5 itself says that amendments shall be valid as part of this Constitution. And one of the framers himself, Roger Sherman, said in 1789, the only thing that Article 5 grants is that whenever we think it's necessary, we may propose amendments to the Constitution. Not we can throw it out and come up with a whole new one. And so, myth busted. An Article 5 convention is not a constitutional convention. It's an amendments convention.
Yep, another one, good one from John.
I like the little word this.
Yep. Well, Ken, that's a wrap for this evening. And I hope everyone's enjoyed our broadcast this evening. So time to start working on next week. And hopefully we'll have a good one next week as well. So everyone, thank you for tuning in. We enjoy doing this. We enjoy bringing this material to you. And we very much appreciate your support for COS today. So anything else, Ken, that you want to say?
Nope, I think we got it all covered tonight, Dale.
Any comments or questions or anything that we need to look at real quick? Or
well, I'll put up one that came up in early, just because it's we had a certain elf kind of agreeing with us and talking about the USA has been treated as not only the global police but the global welfare system as well. That's the way.
I think that's very true.
Been kind of highlighted in our tariff segment. So
I
wanted to get his comment up, but that was the most important one.
Very good observation. That's right. All right, Ken, let's say goodnight, and we'll let Maringo Mike wrap us up this evening. All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Maringo Mike here with a reminder that our work to raise the bar on making our federal government accountable to the people is only halfway done. We need to grow our grassroots army of citizens every day to fulfill the vision of our forefathers and keep our land free and prosperous. So, if you have never signed the petition to show your support, use that QR code and do that now. While you're there, why not kick it up a notch and volunteer for many of the positions available where your talents can make a difference as we march into a new year. Thank you, and God bless.